This is session 1 of the second half of the ops track. We like to remind people of that even because there is a lot going on today. And so it's easy to get lost, like 4 tracks, 48 speakers, like it's a lot. I'm excited to have you. Cannot wait for your session. No one owns your customer data strategy. #fail. Stage is yours.
Thanks, Armando. All right, we're going to dive in. I'm Evan Dunn from Syncery Growth Marketing. I'm a performance poet in my spare time. I do have COVID right now, so forgive me if I break down coughing, but we're just going to go into it. B2B customer data has been a mess for a long time. Most of you probably have felt this personally. I definitely have at 2 different hypergrowth unicorns. Data quality is still the reason everyone is miserable. But let's be specific. We're talking about customer data quality, right? We're talking about CS tools, marketing tools, sales automation and CRM, ERP, billing, and even product usage data. Getting that all to run together for a cohesive customer experience is laughable to most people. This whole journey around customer data has been interesting, right? A lot of people in B2B land, software companies, really have an allergic reaction to customer data. They think CDPs, and that gets really confused because CDPs are really something kind of different than a universal or unifying approach to your customer data. I started asking people, do you have an example of a B2B customer data model, right? Like, here's the customer, and here's how they're represented in all the different systems across opportunities, contacts, accounts, billing entities, user accounts, user entities, etc., and pretty much got crickets back, right? Data teams tend to have something, but most go-to-market operators don't have a unified model for their customer data. And we'll come back to the impact of this and why it's such a big mess, but we're going to get into how we got here a bit, right? If you're in software, there's 2 legs that pretty much walk the software company forward. You got the product leg and you've got the go-to-market leg, right? Typically, you start with one or both of these in the early days, and then all of a sudden you want to analyze user data, you want to get into user behavior and automate some triggers in your product, and you hire a data team to support that product team. And then on the go-to-market side, you've got sales, marketing, CS, and then you've got operations teams that start to help them be more efficient and effective with outreach and with their communications with customers. Pretty quickly, data needs arise in 3 veins, right? You've got the product automation and analytics that becomes a warehouse with a product analytics tool, user behavior analysis and feeding into, okay, how do we change the UI, UX? How do we change engagement in there? We're not going to talk so much about that today. We're going to talk about these 2 other scenarios. Business intelligence, where leadership says, hey, I want to see what's happening on the ground, and go-to-market data quality and automation. In other words, the fields, records, and mapping of data within the go-to-market stack, CRM, ERP, marketing automation, sales automation, et cetera, right? Both of these pop up, and the question comes pretty quickly, like, who's going to own this? Well, the data team, because it's in the name, right? Traditionally, data teams take over this kind of holistic approach, though you'll notice that go-to-market data quality and automation, that doesn't really roll off the tongue. There isn't a category for this so much, right? There are data quality tools or iPaaS tools that live inside of the go-to-market stack, but that's generally separate from like a modern data stack or warehouse approach to solving those use cases, right? Whereas the business intelligence stack is pretty much always a warehouse. I just answered a question in community this morning where someone said, we're going to build out a BI stack. I need good recommendations on a consultant who can get us a data lake or warehouse and a BI tool. That's just how it's done, right? Now, is this product-based data team really the best fit for BI and go-to-market data quality automation? We'll come back to that a bit, right? They still struggle with data quality from source systems, meaning the go-to-market stack, right? And are they the best fit for go-to-market data quality automation, or have we kind of been hoodwinked a bit over the last decade? No one's fault, just the wrong approach. If you look, I'm going to answer that last question. Has this been the wrong approach? I mean, the data team own go-to-market data quality and business intelligence. If you look right now in LinkedIn Sales Navigator, you put in, U.S. software companies, 50 to 1,000 employees, so mid-market SaaS, let's say, and you put in Rev Ops, go-to-market ops, marketing ops, sales ops, et cetera, lots of different permutations of that title, you'll cap at about 6,000 people. If instead in the same set you put in data, analytics, BI, titles. Altogether, you get about 41,000 people. Now, even if half of these people are dedicated to, on the data side, are dedicated to product engagement and analytics, it's clear that the industry has made one really big bet, again, on the data team and the data stack. We're not the first to recognize this bias in investment and even call it some sort of bloat, right? Sacra in September and many others have followed suit, analyze this as the fat data layer in B2B SaaS. It didn't used to be so many tools involved in handling data for go-to-market teams, right? Now, whether or not you feel like that lopsided investment is a problem, let's talk about the situation again, right? The sort of level setting. Go-to-market teams need more data support than they're getting. Most data teams and leaders don't see themselves as an active part of that go-to-market data quality and automation solution. In fact, the thing now, if you're in data, is to say, well, let's do a data contract, which doesn't actually help go-to-market operations. It says go-to-market operations needs to adhere to these standards for data in order for us to work together and push data into the warehouse. When we ask who owns customer data, Elise Vu of Syncery went to her audience on LinkedIn and asked, sales and marketing folks, who owns customer data? They all said RevOps. When I went to the data quality camp and asked who owns customer data in B2B, they all said product. This divide is really important, and you see it all the time. There's a go-to-market versus product split, a chasm, if you will. That was our newsletter last week. The RevOps teams rarely have the skills or resources to solve what Andy Mowat of Gated, formerly Box and Upwork, calls the data layer. We had a podcast with him recently on this topic as well. Now, stuff is really hitting the fan, and I want to be clear, we're not saying this is anyone's fault in particular, just that there needs to be a better approach, a holistic approach to customer data. If you think about it now, we've got tons of layoffs in go-to-market teams, sales teams, especially CS teams, even data teams are hit with these layoffs, right? Go-to-market efficiency is all of a sudden the number one priority, and you can't go to market effectively with messy data. Anyone who's been like a demand gen role or marketing role, like me, trying to get things done with messy data, you can't, right? iPaaS and CRM-only data quality tools don't solve it because they're just moving the mess around or trying to clean it up in the CRM and push it back out. Data teams aren't attached to business value, and now they're suffering for it. Data teams on Blind talk about this all the time. They can't find data science jobs. They can't find analytics jobs that aren't miserable, right? Dealing with data quality issues and shifting stakeholder requirements. So there's a few anecdotes I've got here from social, right? Here's Mark Freeman talking about data quality issues. We're a data-driven company. We need to focus on building new features before we invest in data infrastructure. Why is it so hard to understand what our users are doing in our product? And that's actually a product analytics data quality problem. Here's Julia Gillen. It's a CRO of Pocus now. Congrats, Julia. Hopefully I said your last name correctly. She's just a bit ago was talking about why are we chasing down customer data everywhere, right? She's been in tons of scenarios where you're looking at 5 to 10 different tools for this data. Here's Cassidy Shield of Refine Labs. Our CRM data is a mess is the number one issue he hears preventing marketing and sales progress. I commented to say, well, it's more than just CRM, right? And he agreed, right? This is a pretty common issue across the entire go-to-market. And here's a data person on Reddit. Thank you, Richard McCarr, for sharing this. Getting extremely fed up with how tedious this field's got. Clean data doesn't exist. And here he's talking about dashboard requirement changes, right? Changing colors on a dashboard and that sort of thing. And this one is painful, right? This is a friend, right? Head of CS at a unicorn. Manual data work is the bane of my existence, but I'm afraid to leave and find the same thing somewhere else. People leave jobs over data issues. Absolutely, they do. Right. So symptoms of this mess. Are you one of these companies that struggles with the customer data mess, we'll call it? High churn among GTM roles. Look for this, right? Frustration with ops support from sales, marketing, CS, and finance. Do they feel like they're not getting enough help when really the ops people are drowning too? Last minute scrambles to do anything that requires a data transfer, requiring SQL and go-to-market roles like CS, or just lots of wasted time auditing records and gathering context, chair swiveling. I've spent way too much of my life auditing leads. What can you do? Can dig deep into data issues and go to market, how much manual data work is actually happening in frontline teams, where are the customer experience breakpoints? They usually happen in the handoffs between users and CS or sales to CS. Are accurate, consistent reports elusive, or even if they're just basic reports on pipeline and things like that? Identify one or two people, ideally on GTM, one GTM ops and one data person, to own the customer data, to sit down and create a customer data model and visualize what that means. Deploy the model to your best ability. across your stack, shift some of the data engineering power from the product side to the go-to-market ops side. And that doesn't mean they need to change teams. They just focus on enabling go-to-market operators to have clean data. Andy Moen on our podcast the other week said the world should not have to learn SQL to be good in data. And that was part of this whole story of, we really need to enable go-to-market teams to be successful with business data across their entire stack. So if you want to be further part of this conversation, join our community, synchrony.com/CDA. We'll take you to the customer data automation community, where we're having these conversations every day.
Evan, thank you so much. I love this topic for obvious reasons, and I very, very much second what you just walked through. I have a few reactions. Number one, wasn't CDP solutions supposed to solve this?
Yeah, I think you know the answer to that, right? CDP came onto the scene when web analytics was a big need, right? And user analytics was a big need. And it didn't really bring anything new to the table in terms of integrations, right? So when CDPs try to unify the stack, they run into the exact same problems as ETL and iPaaS providers, where they're just copy pasting from A to B and trying to unify it in a warehouse, but that warehouse is just hidden inside of the CDP, right?
Yes. And then the other question is, like RevOps or ops in general, as far as I can see, curious about your reaction here, whether you see the same thing or not. It's most often than not kind of an operational role. It's not a very strategic role, right? They are like a service provider, for lack of better terms, to the rest of the organization. So they have a super long list of things that they need to look into, take care of, and like need to prioritize, and lots of like competing, things in there. Is that your experience as well?
Oh, absolutely. And their bias naturally is to create a field, right, to solve a functional flow, workflow process use case, just to get it done and get it out the door, because they're in the revenue organization. They're under pressure for revenue, not pressure for data quality. Whereas the data team is under pressure for pipelines that work, right? Maybe they should be attached to revenue a bit more closely. But so data teams are mad at ops teams for bad data quality. Ops teams are, underwater trying to just support this machine. And this is how you get a decade and a half into this problem with no common solution, right?
And so first and foremost, if there are additional questions from the audience, feel free to just shoot them over in the chat. We'll take them from there. So how do you solve this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I can give the Synchrony pitch, but beyond that today, right, like it starts by thinking through this logic, right? The customer data exists for the customer experience. There's one customer. There's not 5 customers in many systems, right?
But also,
so how do you...
Yes, but that's the mechanical part. Then to some degree, there is also like there should be a strategic owner, or like a customer data strategy owner that's higher up in the decision chain.
Yeah, and people get really hung up on titles here, Armando, all the time. They're like, "Oh, should it be the head of data, the head of RevOps?" I don't really care, right? As long as it's clear that this person's job is to enable a holistic view of the customer across all systems and reports, right? Without that mentality, like nothing else can work, right?
I think to me, it's really two things, right? Like elevating this aspect, which is like mechanical, so you have to be able to navigate it to a decision-making level. And then there is another aspect of it, which again, curious about your reaction, which most companies don't really think about, is this idea of tying data back to actionability, some kind of business outcome that matters and moves the needle, because otherwise, why are you even keeping all this data for? It's just like a weight, a cost of doing business that doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think data teams tend to be biased towards the collection because it's very hard to answer that question, which data is valuable, right? And the product data bias is collect many events, right? And then analyze to figure out. And there's some wisdom to that, right? Because if you discard it, well, maybe there was gold in there. But you're right. The data warehouse industry push has been collection bias. rather than action bias and utility bias of data. And I think this is where RevOps and
Or
data teams,
data for what purpose, essentially.
yeah, absolutely. RevOps and data teams need to get together and collectively determine what's the minimum viable data that you need in order to serve the customer well. Right.
Love it. Well, Ivan, thank you so much. Thanks for watching, everyone, as well. Let Ivan know how their session was with the quick survey that you see in the chat. Oh, wait, there is Nick saying metric library to drive business signals and actions on those signals is key. Armando, agree with that. Evan, we'll see you very, very soon. Everyone else, we're going to be back online in 5 minutes. Thank you so much.